Good morning. It is Friday, February 27th. Getting the Friday started, we're going to talk about some things that I'm seeing in the marketplace. We're going to go over a couple reports that Zillow has put out and yeah, give a sense of some ways in which I think we can begin to change some of our mindset for how we're going to approach this market. Because a lot of the talking points that we've heard were from 25 looking forward. The farther we get into 26, we know what we're working with. So let me tell you what I'm seeing right now. Agents are not struggling because the market is crashing. They're struggling because the market isn't obvious. They don't know which way things are going. They're not sure how to guide their buyers and sellers through a market that is kind of just existing. It's not booming, it's not collapsing, it's recalibrating. And a recalibration exposes how we can handle ourselves during these periods. It exposes leadership gap. So in 2021, you did not need to be courageous to price a house aggressively because the market made up for any issues in that sense. The market was moving at such a speed that even if you underpriced, the market would yield multiple offers and land at a higher price. And if you overpriced, the market would soon catch you. You didn't need courage at that point to have a buyer waive contingencies because 6 months after, as they're sitting on 5 to 10% more equity than they paid, that equity makes you look like a genius and overcomes any challenges that could have arisen from that. Carried that market. Today, you need a little bit more courage. We need to have a little bit more courage in our conversations to price a listing 3, 4, 5% below where the seller feels like that is, where the value is sometimes a hard conversation to have. To tell a buyer that, hey, we're not going back to 4% rates, like all indications are that these rates are here to stay. How long are you going to sit on the sidelines before making the decision? Pushing for a reduction on your listing after, 2 to 3 weeks. Because sometimes we're fearful of how they're going to perceive us in that conversation. Are you looking out for my best interest and getting as much as we possibly can? Or are you just trying to get it sold as fast as you can so you can get paid and move on? To call customers who have previously ghosted us. There's a lot of those from the last couple of years, huh? Our pipelines, if we look at those as pipeline fillers, are full, but we've got to be the ones to stay in contact, to pick up the phone and make the call, even when they weren't ready 6 months ago. This is a market that requires courage for conversations. I want to read from Leadership Promises for Every Day, A Leader's Courage. There's a verse that says, "Be strong and of good courage," Deuteronomy 31:7. Whenever you see a significant progress in an organization, it's because the leader made courageous decisions. However, leadership position doesn't give a person courage, but courage can give them a leadership position. As you approach the tough decisions that will challenge you, recognize these truths about courage. Courage begins with an inward battle. Courage isn't an absence of fear. It's doing what you are afraid to do. Courage is making things right, not just smoothing them over. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." Courage in a leader inspires commitment from followers. Courage is contagious. Evangelist Billy Graham said that. Courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, the spine of others are stiffened. Courage by leaders inspire. Your life expands in proportion to your courage. Roman historian Tacitus said, "The desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise, but courage opens doors, and that is one of its most wonderful benefits." So as we're sitting here in a market that is somewhat not a lot to talk about, might not be one of those years we're going to write home about. If you've been around for any period of time, it puts us in a position where we have to be ones that are action takers. We are not ones that are waiting. A lot of times I find that we know exactly what we need to do, but are we courageous enough to do it? Are we courageous enough to have hard conversations? Are we courageous enough to call back that customer and make another proposition for how we are going to help them get what they want? We're going to help them make a good buying or selling decision. And so I challenge you today to think about what calls, what relationships, what new activities, what new marketing plans are we not being courageous enough to step into? because today could be the day we step into that, and that could change everything for us. So I want to bridge into talking about some stats that came out from Zillow, and then we're going to dive a little bit specifically into the Orlando market. So if you're not in our Orlando market, bear with me, because I think as we talk through the ways in which we can review market data to help us have a better understanding and to help drive some of our conversations, it's going to make us better. And so we need to be able to do this in our market, wherever you are, and then subsequent markets where buyers and sellers are coming from. Something I'm constantly talking about as we are kind of going through this market is, and this would be true in any market. I was talking about this with somebody last night, that we were essentially saying that go back to 21 when the market was moving at such a speed. You could be patient. Time, I say it all the time, that time is not your friend when you're trying to sell a house. Like, the longer we're on the market, usually better things don't happen. There are exceptions to that. And there was an exception to that in 21, 22, when the market was moving at such a speed where if you waited too long, the market would improve. If you overprice, the market may catch you. Time was maybe in your favor, unless you got caught at the end of that cycle, right? The challenge is, if you wait and the home value of what you're selling goes up, where are you going to? And this is what makes residential single family real estate so challenging for so many people. Or how do you move into an area with a different maybe asset class, right? So you go from a single family house to an RV. That might be the only way you could really short the single family real estate market, potentially. And so I think a lot of our buyers and sellers, they think about this in a very one-dimensional way, where they're thinking, if I wait a little longer and the values go up, I'll be better off. I'll have more money to take to my next house. The question is, well, where are you going? What asset class are you going to? When I say asset class, I'm talking like maybe micro markets, right? You might be moving into a market that is appreciating at a faster pace than yours. That would mean you don't come out better by waiting. Or if you're moving into something that is a depreciating market, maybe you do come out better and you bridge that gap because you're going into a completely different style of housing or a completely different market, right? Now, so I think we've got to be better at asking some of those questions of our buyers and our sellers to understand, where are you going? How can I help make sense of getting you from point A to point B? And does time help bridge that gap better or worse? So we've got to be able to click in and dial into some specific markets, because if we can help them make sense of it, it's going to help us dramatically in the long term. All right, so I want to dial in here to the Consumer Housing Trend Report 2025. This was put out right at the end of the year by Zillow, and talk over a handful of things. So Zillow forecasts a 1.2% appreciation in 2026 after effectively a flat 2025. So the interpretation is we are moving into a period of some stability. Now, we need to make sure that exceeds what the inflation rate is, or there's an effective net decrease, but we're looking at a positive upward trend in home values regardless. So not a runway for growth, but it's also not decline. This is a market where professionals are going to yield the most fruit and the most success. Zillow projects a 4.26 million existing sales in this coming year. So that is nearly a 5% increase over 2025, which is a good thing. We want to see an increase in transactions. Now, I'll sidebar here. If you're listening to this as a consumer, let me sidebar for our real estate agents here for a minute. One of the things that is absolutely true in our business is a velocity of sales is a good thing. I'm going to say that again. A velocity of sales is a good thing. This means units over volume, right? If we had a really high volume market that sold very infrequently, we don't have much of a business, right? We're going to get one every once in a while, versus a market where things are constantly transacting. And so the point of this conversation is to say, don't have fear of markets moving upward or down, because we don't control values. We don't control interest rates. We don't control buying decisions for buyers and sellers. We can help guide them. What we need for a good, thriving real estate business is a velocity of transactions. We need a lot of transactions. And so that's where last year and kind of the end of 24 leading in was so challenging, and why it left so many agents having really hard times is because we were having a 33-year low in terms of real estate transactions in total. okay, with more agents in the market. And so there was just not enough transaction volume to keep so many people's businesses afloat. Hence why we saw so many agents leave the industry last year. They're projecting mortgage rates. Zillow says unlikely to drop below 6% in 2026. And the headlines right now are at 6, maybe 5.9, 5.99. So this is a big thing for agent scripts because when we're talking to our customers, they've got to understand that this is where we're at right now. This is where we're going to hang for the foreseeable future. So how long are you willing to wait in hopes that interest rates are going to change in the future? I mean, we may be here for a long time. And that's one thing I know, having been in real estate as long as I have, is that these cycles are always longer than you expect. I don't like it. It's just a reality. Margin. We need margin. Margin allows us to have time to wait for cycles. That's where the hedge funds play. They play in knowing that they can outweight anybody else in a downtrending market because they can time the buy in and buy out period. Buy low, sell high, right? Easy to say, hard to do. It's hard to do when you're dealing with cycles of real estate. In new construction, Zillow says single family starts trending down. So we start seeing less of that. Builders are holding back a little bit. That means less future supply, long-term price support. Because if we oversupply the market with new construction, we're obviously going to see a downward trend in pricing. But I think builders are also, there's some of them that already own the land. They've already got their plans. So they're going to continue to build. The funding is there. And there is still a need, especially in certain markets. But I think a lot of them, in terms of taking new swings at new areas, it's the data is not there to encourage them. The problem with builders is they also have to be thinking for some of these large projects 5-10 years ahead, not what's happening this year. And so it'll be interesting throughout this year to start to watch how they start to perceive the coming 5, 6, 7 year period. So I think what we're going to see is builders starting to lean heavily on incentives to encourage purchasing new construction with them over existing inventory. Zillow predicts a total transaction value up 10.9% in 2026, 2/3 of that driven by price. That means even if volume is modest, pricing strength carries value. Even if volume is modest, pricing strength will carry the value. Less chaos, more stability, but this is also going to require more skilled work by you to help get these deals to the finish line. Now, let me dive into an Orlando specific screen here because I think it's incumbent on us to start to understand how our market looks, what it looks like currently, what it's projected to do, what our inventory is like. And so these reports are really good because it's pulling right out of the data that is available in Zillow, which is pulling just about everything currently. So Orlando key takeaways: typical home values 367,868. This is data through January 31st. The 1-year change, looking back, was a 4% decrease. Now, is the sky falling? That's the question, right? Because a 4% decrease in home values is a challenge, but it's based on what the average trending sale price is for a year ago. And so when we really dial this in, we can see this is just a lot of data points coming together for an average. So let's see where our high point is here. 5,877. This was in July of last year, so end of summer. And then currently we're sitting at a 367,868. So 4% adjustment there. This is Orlando specific. 3,909 homes for sale, 744 new listings. That would be within the last 30 days, I believe. Median list to sale price ratio. So we're seeing very little off of price. So you're seeing, 0.025, 2.5% off of list price on average. That's a good thing to know. 167 median sale price, median list price 364. So that's interesting. Our average list prices or median list prices are actually lower than our median sale prices. I think one thing that indicates to me is because where we're feeling the most struggle in this market right now is the lower price point. We're feeling the most struggle in our first-time home buyers. And so we're seeing a little longer time period on those transactions. And the higher the price point, we're actually seeing a little bit more because most of those buyers are bringing equity from a previous house, right? The more equity you bring, the less impact interest rates will have on the purchase. Does that make sense? Because it's a lower percentage overall than 100% finance at a higher interest rate. So we've got to understand kind of how and why that would happen. 12.1% of sales are over list price. That's an interesting stat for December. And then almost 70% of sales are under list price. And then obviously there's a bulk of them that are right at list price. Median days on market before they go pending is 46. And that would be for the city of Orlando, right? Now, here's what I want to do. And this is where it gets kind of fun and interesting at the same time. Let's go to just single family homes in Orlando. High point in this period was for single family homes in Orlando in 24, looks like June of 24. And then we're down, if we go back a year from now, let's go back to 25. We were at 410. And now we're at 394. These are average trending sale prices. Still same adjustment as previously. It's not updating these data points, unfortunately. But these are things that we need to start to get a grip on and fully understand, because what this does for us is start to understand how we can compare this market to market. So let's just take a stab at if we were to compare someone selling in this market and moving to Winter Garden, Florida. What are they seeing out there? Let's go single family as well. So they've got a very similar list to sale price ratio. 7% of sales are over list price, 80% are under list price, 45 median day pending. Right, so we start to contrast. Very similar market, not far outside of Orlando, but we do have people that are moving inside these markets. And to be able to do is help them evaluate. Because if you're taking how you're negotiating here and taking that same approach to a different market, it may not apply. We've got to know how we can move inside the markets. My goal is to get you from point A to point B. Well, how do we strategize this in a way that is going to engage and let you have an outcome that you can be very excited about? How can we do this in a way that helps you feel like you moved into a net positive situation? Okay. So I would challenge you, whatever market you're specializing in, come spend a little bit of time in here. It's going to help you dramatically. The final thing I want to talk about is the reality of what could be coming to Florida. I've had my social media blowing up over the topic of Florida real estate taxes being proposed to be eliminated. Now, there's a bill currently floating. It's already been passed through the House. It's got to be voted on by the Senate. If it is passed through the Senate, and they could make some changes to it, so we don't know all the details of how this will come out, but it will ultimately have to go to our ballot in November to be voted on. So there is a chance, and I'll keep you informed as I have updates on this in terms of likelihood of this outcome, that Florida eliminates property taxes for homesteaded buyers, with the exception of the school components of the property tax bill. So this could equate to 60% of a property tax bill. Now, the question is, there's a lot of questions that are being asked. How do we replace that? How do we cover our fire and police? And that's a whole separate topic. The reality is, if this goes through, we're going to have a surge of buyers that are looking to put their homestead in Florida. Homestead in Florida is going to have no real estate taxes and no income taxes. We also need to be pushing into our first-time buyers who have been sitting on the sidelines, preferring to rent, to understand how this helps affect them. And so I'll just challenge a lot of the talking points out there. A lot of the talking points say that this only helps the rich. This only helps the higher income and the wealthy. And I would challenge to say, well, man, if your property tax bill is, $4,000 or $5,000 a year, what does that do on a monthly basis for you? How does that start to level the playing field with rent? And I would even argue, because multifamily properties that they're renting from or investors that they're renting from will not have this benefit. Therefore, it's going to cost them more to exist just to cover their basic costs. Therefore, does the prospect of home ownership make that much more sense to some of our buyers in the long term? And maybe it starts even reduce how long it takes for that to make sense. I think we've got to make sure they understand that and can get ahead of that curve, because when things become more affordable, demand increases. And when demand increases, things become less affordable, right? It's this constant seesaw that we're on. And so the beauty is, you as a homeowner or a potential homesteaded buyer could go buy any house and eliminate the property tax component. Therefore, it's going to be more valuable to you and less costly to you than someone who's using it for rent. It's going to put a lot of power in the hands of the person who's going to reside here in the state of Florida. So I want to make sure we're having that conversation, that we're telling our buyers who are sitting on the sidelines of this, they need to make sure that they are fully understanding the potential benefits of this. So again, this market is not about momentum. It's about being strategic. It's about understanding all of the moving parts and helping to educate our buyers well. To do that well, sometimes it requires courage and it requires saying things that maybe people don't even want to hear, but sometimes it's something they need to hear. And so I challenge you, dig deeper, understand the moving parts of the market that you're selling, understand the product. Because when you understand the product, AI can't replace you. The internet, access to someone else showing up to show me the home can't replace you, because most buyers have more fish to fry. They've got to be able to buy and they've got to be able to sell. They need to figure out how to put it all together. Our job is to help them put it all together. Ask more questions, good questions, get good answers. Be courageous.